George Kilpatrick, inspiration for the nation, celebrating people we feel good about. We got a brother who has done some great work in law enforcement, the past president of the Black Troopers Association of New York, New York State. Is that the National Black Troopers or just New York?
I actually sat on an executive board of the National Black State Troopers Coalition nationally, but for the Guardian Association, New York State Troopers, I'm the immediate past president.
Eliot Boyce, 34 years with the New York State Troopers, also a senior investigator. So glad you could be a part of the conversation, talking about law enforcement in the community and what it's like to be Black and blue. So what is it like to be Black and blue?
Being Black and blue is very difficult. And when I say very difficult, from the standpoint of you're trying to have an impact, but you have to have an equal balance. You can't lose who you are. You must framework with the fact that, I'm born Black or die Black. And that's something that's very important to me as I move throughout my career in the 34 years. But when you see some of the things that happen around the country, some of the social injustices, some of the things that are impacting law enforcement, it's really difficult trying to explain to a industry that's dominated by white males. And it's amazing because when you say that, it usually turns people off. Oh, he said the white male word. Truth of the matter is that's the nature of policing. And so it's a struggle, but I think we have some really good people within the ranks of the Division State Police. I think there's some really good police officers around the country. I do believe that there's been some things that have warranted the actions that we are dealing with. Historically, bad decisions, bad judgments, bad police officers. But I think a lot of things that we really need to talk about is the fact that is we can't paint with a broad brush. When I mean paint by a broad brush, I will flat out say there are some white officers that I would take to battle with me every day, and I believe they would not do anything wrong, embarrass me, embarrass Georgia, embarrass the community. Mm-hmm. On the same token, if I'm gonna be level, I do believe there's some Black officers that I wouldn't walk across the street with.
Wow, that's deep. Mm-hmm. What is that about? We gotta. What do they say? We gotta interrogate that. We gotta
unpack it.
Yes.
Let's talk about it from this framework. When I said initially that most police department is a framework with white males, that has been for years. I mean, when you talk about the numbers, even the numbers of Division State Police, we have over 4,000 members. We have less than 202 Blacks. So we have 170 males, 32 females. So it's a struggle. In order for us to change policing, we have to change the dynamics of the view that is represented within policing. But the end all be all word had always been diversity. And this is where I think we got caught up because diversity is a matter of increasing the numbers. But if you increase the numbers with people that are not conscious, what happens is you just have a number. Mm-hmm. And when I say you just have a number is if I take 200, say we double a number of African-American males, Latinos, or cultures that are underrepresented within the ranks, and they just go in and blend, then we don't have diversity. We just have a number, right? In order for us to be really diverse, we have to be inclusive, in which that number has an impact and the ability to change. And the change that's most important is the mindset of individuals that are not accustomed to dealing with that particular culture. So for example, if you're dominated by a crew of say, white males, you have an African-American in there, clear, fruitful conversations, understanding what the community they're dealing with, understanding why somebody may have reacted that way, not being concerned that, you're going to be, blacklisted or blackballed for speaking up, having conversations. When you have those conversations within the ranks, now you're not a number. Mm-hmm. Now you are representative of your culture and how to move your culture forward. And really what's important is you move your police agency forward.
And so, but why is it that the brothers, is there something going on? Do they get caught up in the system? Those that you say you wouldn't walk across the street with?
Yeah, I think some of the ones, I've traveled around the country and, so I'm not pinpointing my agency. I've traveled around the country doing different lectures and programs and interacting with people on a lot of different levels. And what happens is it becomes a comfort zone. I'm getting paid. I'm getting a check. I'm not gonna rock the boat. Maybe that person, had a drug arrest, so I'm not gonna really stick out to them. And to me, how you should be a representative of the police department, or as your respect level should be, when you walk in a room, they should know better. or anyone should know better that may believe to cross the line. If you develop that type of respect, you dominate. We talked about Chuck Jones. Chuck
Yeah.
Jones was a zone sergeant in North Syracuse before he retired from the state police. Chuck Jones demanded that type of aura that when he walked in the room, you knew you couldn't just say anything. You knew you couldn't just, push the envelope too far because he was going to challenge you. And that challenge, even though it was in a respectful way, and if you know Chuck Jones, it could be a real direct, pointed way. But what he did was, when things happened, he had conversations amongst the troops. We would go into his office or we go into the squad room, and we would have open dialogue about what the current event was. And though some people may not agree, they did have a better understanding as to where he was coming from, from African American, where the Latino person was coming from, and also where the white officer was coming from. And because of that dialogue, because of that open free speech, it gave us an opportunity to understand each other better and put out better police officers.
So what I'm hearing you say is some of us get in position and we go along to get along, as opposed to standing up for what we know is right in that moment, or
Yes.
commanding respect in that moment. We go along to get along because we think that that's a way for us to advance in our career, or no, don't rock the boat, or become part of the system, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, it's the safe way to operate. The industry of law enforcement is a dangerous industry. We know that, going out on the streets, that you have to protect yourself at all times.
Right.
I think what happens is people realize it's easier just to go along with the flow. Some of the incidents that we've been seeing around the country, which really have ignited, and united the country for our social justice and different things. Many of these incidents have African-American men standing there, or being a part of it. Now, the culture of law enforcement
I
is
mean, it's
different.
part of law enforcement, like they
Part
part
of law
of the job.
enforcement, yes.
Yeah.
Where they could have had an impact, for whatever reason they did not. In some cases, it's just you're there, but you have to be there in a dominant personality. But that is very difficult to do, and be part of if um, if it's a situation in which you are concerned for your livelihood, or you're concerned for your financial background. So I just believe, we have to take a role, and there's a lot of Black, Latino, and again, I just don't want to lose any particular culture. I think when the topic comes up about policing, it's usually geared towards, Black or Latino members, but there are a lot of different and other cultures that are represented in law enforcement that are forgotten also, because due
Such
to
as,
the sheer lack of numbers, they're not represented. But we have to be stronger as we engage with our community. And when I say we, I'm talking about police agencies as a whole,
Mhm.
and police organizations that are represented by Black and Latino organizations. We have to be ahead of it, because you can't expect somebody that comes from the suburb to go into the inner city of Syracuse and understand the culture. One of the things I speak about is, we have New York City. And whenever you go somewhere and you travel, you say you're from New York, the first thing people say, oh, you're from New York City. No, I'm from upstate. But what they don't realize is the manner in which people interact in New York City is at a faster pace.
Right.
I'm a Brooklyn kid, and still to this day, people say, I can hear your accent and you talk fast. And I've been out of Brooklyn close to 30 years now, 35 plus years. But when you have a kid or a young adult that travels up the thruway or up the highway, or he gets in one of these rural areas in college and he interacts with a police officer, the way he traditionally or she interacts may come off as being offensive or aggressive,
Right.
just because of the nature of New York City. And that's something that I think most police officers in those rural areas that have colleges have adapted to. But then there's some that choose not to adapt.
Eliot Boyce, past president of Black Troopers Association. So, Eliot, a couple of issues. Uh, there's an issue right here in Janesville, New York, right? So there's a situation. We had a situation in Rochester around mental health. When thing we thought that it was best if, when there's a mental health situation, that and in the situation here in Janesville, obviously somebody died. State police was involved, and I know your ability to comment on that. which we discussed is not, well, you really can't. But what can you say about this idea about how we treat individuals when we respond when there's a mental health issue? Because we saw this in Rochester. We also saw this in Janesville, New York.
Yeah. Mental health is a difficult topic. It's a topic in which, when you talk about citizens and people in the United States, that's something that for the longest time we have not exposed. We've kept silent. And when you say keep silent, it's it's individuals that are struggling with mental issues or concerns that have to go address. But when you talk about the police officers, I think some of the things they're talking about, having, social workers go out and respond, that's gonna be a difficult task. You're talking about putting social workers and mental health clinicians that do their jobs very well at harm's way. It'd be interesting to see what their perspective is on that. I do understand that, when you're faced with a dangerous situation, police officers have to be mindful of that. And I think what happens that gets lost in a lot of these cases is, I'll just say one, death is permanent, is nothing that anyone wants to bear. And I think what happens when we get to a lot of these situations, we forget that these police officers got to bear that for the rest of their lives. Because see, no one wakes up in the morning as a police officer and says, hey, I want to be on the front page of the newspaper for causing someone's death.
Well, and in the case, again, the case in Janesville, this was a person who was in mental health duress. The call was made. They had, and now that person is dead. But they knew, and I'm not trying to skate you to comment directly. I'm just saying, we know, but like what advocates have been saying is, if we know somebody has a mental health issue and we bring all of those supports, shouldn't there be a different outcome?
Yeah, you always hope for the best outcome. I'll give you an example, and I think one of the best things that we could actually do for individuals that are part of the community is put on some type of training in which they are actively involved in a situation that involves something that's possibly a danger. I remember many years ago when I worked narcotics, I was faced with a situation where a young man we pulled up and we engaged conversation with him, and he reached for his waistline. When he reached for his waistline, he tugged. The first tug, I'm like, man, that looks like a gun. Second tug, the gun came out. If you ever remember the cartoon where someone pulls out a gun and it's like, that's what it was like. It was like slow motion for me. Everything in my psyche was slowing down. And as he pointed the gun at us and I'm speeding off, the barrel of the gun looked like a cannon. It's difficult to try to decipher from, a live knife, a gun, in some cases, other weapons. If you go on the internet and people start searching, you will find that there's a knife gun out there. There's a cell phone gun out there. There's a flashlight gun, and police officers only have a split second to make that decision. Actually, it's not even a split second. It's just moments. In many cases, that's what they're faced with. I just believe when you think about the mental health aspect of it all, you have to realize it's a really difficult situation. And even when you're told, so if you give a heads up that, hey, this situation is someone dealing with a mental issue, you're not only protecting that individual first, but then you have to protect yourself and the people who are with you. And you also have to be mindful of the people that might be around you. Okay, because if that goes wrong and you didn't take the precautions, and that's what you're thinking of in that split second, that is that individual safety, your personal safety, and the safety of the rest of the community, and it goes wrong, it could be a bad day for everyone.
Eliot, and that all makes sense, except for the fact that often those judgments when it comes to Black people ends up deadly, right? If you're white, you can tear up the Capitol, you can walk with a loaded gun past police officers, you can shoot up a church, you get Burger King, you get McDonald's. How do you account for that disparity, or is there no accounting for it?
You can't account for it. It's unfortunate. I see them. I've tracked a lot of them, and actually tracking to the point where it's frustrating. I am a proud police officer. 34 years, I live it, I eat it, I believe it. I believe in the good police officers out there that unfortunately are getting hit unjustly with some of the commentary that we're hearing. But unfortunately, a part of our police forces around the country are not looking at it in a manner of, this is going to be bad optics. And not only is it bad optics, it's not proper procedure. Because it's not proper procedure, any individual is going to look at it and say it's wrong. I mean, what happened with George Floyd basically shined a real bad light on law enforcement. But what it did is it galvanized a diverse group of people. See, what you often hear is Black Lives Matter.
You do.
Black Lives Matter has been the headliner for a lot of things, and they've been a catalyst for a movement in this current era that has been powerful. Problem is, that's unfair is within that Black Lives Matter is a diverse group. When you talk about blacks, black females, Latino, Asian, white females, suburban females, and white males that are basically saying enough, and when you look at it, it's galvanizing, but it's frustrating to people because the first thing they hear is Black Lives Matter. And I think in order for us to improve with the mental health aspect of it all, with the social justice of it all, you have to have conversations. And what we're not having nowadays is conversations. It's a clash in many cases. And that's going to be the catalyst for improving.
But Eliot, you've been in this game long enough to know that when your officers are in the room and they're getting the diversity, inclusion, equity, bias training, what's really happening?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I think that's where we're at now. I can tell you this. We have the new president for the Guardian Association, New York State Troopers, her new executive board. They have been doing a phenomenal job of really engaging our executive staff. One of the things that happens with the training is, and you got to understand, training is parallel with money and funding. It costs a lot of money for this. And I'm only saying that because when we talk about defunding the police, and I understand police reform, which is key. When we start talking about these are things that get taken
the first
away.
to go. Right.
Some of those are some of the things that first to go. But even with those trainings, I think what we have to get better on is bringing people in that are representative of the cultures to have real conversations. The days of doing training where it's on the computer, you listen to a video, which you tune out, and then you click and go. And when I say click and go, it's computer based.
No, we've all done it.
Yes, we've all done it. We have to get better with that in law enforcement because, I have some individuals I work with, and again, I'll say, unfortunately, the curse word, because whenever you say black and white in a conversation, half of people's brains cut off right away. Like, here they go again. Well, the truth of the matter is, there are some white officers that I've dealt with, encountered with, who will ask conversations or questions because they just don't know. And then when you explain it to them, they're like, I didn't know that. So the expectation of us is that because they become police officers, they come with a handbook of understanding our culture. And the truth of the matter, that's not the case. Also, what happens is there's a lot of police officers out there that, flat out, I'm part of the employee assistance program for the New York State Police.
Right.
Police officers have real life issues, just like citizens, just like our common day individuals, but we don't take that into effect.
A lot of divorce in law enforcement, a lot of domestic violence, unfortunately, in law enforcement.
In law enforcement. Domestic violence, alcohol abuse, which used to be a big one for many years. And what that's about, people go, oh my God, I knew they're always drunk. No, what they're trying to do is settle their nerves from what they've experienced. A police officer in one day could go from, unattended death, someone who just dies of natural causes, to maybe a traumatic car accident, to maybe a baby death, and anything to do with children is going to impact someone because it parallels to their family.
Yeah.
Now what happens is they get to this one call and it's just something simple and this person just blasts them. It's not necessarily that situation. It may be the response of what they dealt with all day. Now, majority of the police officers, 99.9% of it, people go be like, no, that's not true. 99.9% of the police officers in America will keep it in, control it, move forward, and handle it. Unfortunately, there's a percentage. There's a microcosm of society because we are built up from society. And unfortunately, we get bad police in our forces. We know that. And the problem is the good police officers, we don't want them either. Just like society didn't want. There's not a police officer, a good police officer, or police officer in general that wants to walk aside a bad police officer. Times have changed. Back in the day, you used to be able to be, a little stern and maybe pop them a little harder. This is before my time, hit them with the so-called billy club or nightstick. Nowadays, police officers need to realize, or people need to realize, this is my money. It's how I feed my family. don't put me in harm's way where I have to make a decision, because it's going to be simple. You need to go and tell yourself or understand I'm telling the truth. I'm not lying. And I think that mindset changes. But for us to be completely better, we have to have conscious, good police officers, regardless of color, gender, in the forces.
So how y'all doing with that?
We're struggling, and I say we're struggling mainly because we haven't had a class in recent time. In the backdrop too is that people don't talk about is like policing for the longest time. When I grew up, when most of the friends I knew grew up, the first thing we would say is, I don't want to be the police.
I don't want to be
I would,
the
I want to be the popo. I was that person. I'll give him a shout out. Aaron Roberts, he's a retired recruiter from Syracuse, the Troop D area. He still lives in Syracuse. He recruited me when I was at school in OCC. And he basically just challenged my psyche. And I was like, I'll take that challenge. And I took the test. In short, what he said was I was too stupid to pass the test. And I was like, oh, but it worked. And I took the test, and here I am 34 years later. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is, because of the narrative that is currently going on with our community and with young adults, it's turning everyone off. And it's not just blacks, it's Latinos, it's white males, which usually dominate the test.
So we're saying that more brothers in particular, so I'm talking about black folk, more BIPOC, black, indigenous people of color in the force, better representation. But how are we doing with those numbers?
It's a struggle. It's a struggle trying to get them into the test. We need to start younger, which is something that, the recruiting department of the state police is doing. I'm sure Syracuse is doing the same.
What are the numbers right now? What are the numbers?
For us in the state police, we're at only 202 blacks out of 4,000 plus. So just think about that. We're really heavily centralized in the New York City, and at one point was the Buffalo area.
Right.
But in the middle of the state, I could tell you, we have none. There is not, to my knowledge, probably an African-American female. If there is, maybe one between, say, the Verrazano Bridge all the way to Buffalo. You probably won't reach them. So it's thin when it comes to black females. And I think what people need to understand too, this career is rewarding. I mean, the money is good. And again, I don't want to attract anyone based on telling them money, but I will tell you the average New York State trooper within 5 years is going to be making over 100,000, and that's if you're at the baseline being a trooper. I think the starting salary coming out the academy, unless it changes, is about 85,000. So, I mean, the incentive to get on the force is good. The ability to move up to be the superintendent is good. You could be the top person, you study, you could be an investigator, but there's a lot of options in the state police and all these agencies.
All right, here's what people want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Do black parents have to have a talk with their families? And why do they have to? If they have to. They do have to have the talk.
Yeah, we need to have a talk. One of the things that I really will tell or really speak to young adults, if you are faced with any police encounter has the ability to be dangerous. And we need to start speaking to our young adults that,
well, it is dangerous for us, though.
It is dangerous. I say potential. So, like, one of the things that's happening nowadays or coming up in the legislation is they're trying to do a ban on menthol cigarettes. And this is just bad policy, bad business. And the reason why I mean that one, because if they ban menthol cigarettes, black and Latino are the ones that dominate menthol cigarette smoke, right? So you're going to ban menthol, but you're going to keep legal regular cigarettes. What's going to happen is it's going to increase different trades. So if you got a young adult just smoke cigarettes, it increases the chance of a police officer encountering them. The things in which we're going wrong with in society is that these violation encounters are subsequently causes someone's death, mental health response, vehicle and traffic stops, disorderly conducts. These are violations in which you can't even go to jail for. So this should never escalate to danger. So the conversation we should have is, with your parents is, back in the day, our parents, we didn't like it and we don't like hearing it now, is our parents would never talk back to the police. And I understand we have to have or earn or re-earn the respect of the community. But we also, as a community, need to say, okay, it comes a point in time when we need to maybe calm it down and deal with it at a later time, and move from there. Survive the incident. I think that's the best way to put it.
Wow. And that's not comforting, yo.
No.
You're saying you're basically saying keeping it real. You got to just get out of that situation, because what happens is we feel offended in the moment. We realize, what do you mean? Now, I have had several police encounters, and so here's my story, right? Um, some of them have been good. And you know what makes them good for me? What do you think I'm gonna say?
You didn't get a ticket.
I didn't get a ticket.
Exactly.
I think I shared with you one time. Now, I'm not making light of the fact that many people get stopped driving while black. You know, if you got a particular car in a particular neighborhood, I've got colleagues who live in parts of our community that it's a routine for them to be stopped by the police, right? In fact, I got stopped the other day. The officer was so nice. I was like, I would have taken the attitude if you didn't give me the ticket.
That's understood.
You know what I'm saying? I don't need all. I mean, I appreciate the niceties, but take all of that. You know.
Yeah.
So how do you? So you say the goal is to. So, and I'm making light of it. I know this is not funny because people have lost their lives in this moment. I'm just having a little levity here, but you say survive the incident. So what's the rules? If they, and I can tell you one incident that I did survive. I did something really dumb. I don't know. I've shared this with other officers, right? I got stopped in Liverpool, and the officer made a mistake. He says, "You need to get your license. It expired." I said, so I said, "Oh no, it didn't." After the encounter, and then guess what? Dum Dum does. I don't mean to call myself that. I get out of the car and start walking towards the officer. And it wasn't until he said, "Stay right there," that I realized, oh,
This is a bad move.
That was a bad move.
Especially in this day and age in climate. Look.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously I realized, oh, get back in the car. And it was pitch black. It was dark. So that could have went hella wrong. Like could have gone hella wrong. But you know, we saw the situation, the situation in Nashville, Tennessee. I don't know if you've seen that, where a woman was driving in a car that car was wanted for a lot of drug stuff came up on the car she was driving, and so she wasn't at fault for anything, but the plates ran up as warrants, right? It ended up that the report was that there was a shootout, but when I look at the video, I never saw a gun. He said there was a gun. I never saw it, and they're still investigating that. Now, another friend of mine who's in law enforcement, she had a gun. You have to see that. So, but there's a lot of discrepancy around that. But before that, Eliot, the point I'm trying to make, it was going well. She was nice. She was allowed to go. Until he said these words, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to arrest you." And it was because of not the car, it was because he allegedly found some marijuana or something. And so that meant now I have to give you a ticket or whatever it is. Well, she ran, and she's now dead. And Eliot, to the point where she has time, she's on the phone with her mother. That's what makes it so heartbreaking. She's talking to her mother. There's a whole conversation. "Mom, you're gonna have to come get me because they ran plates on Bebe car, and you know you gotta come get me."
Right. I'll explain this one like this. You know, I talked about the menthols, but a lot of times people don't see what we see. Okay, as police officers. And a couple of things that maybe we should do or really start engaging with is how do we do programming in which the community are allowed to engage with police officers? And one of the things I said for, like the statesmen, the people that are in politics who, politicians, there's a couple of programs that maybe you could do, like they call this thing, it used to be the fax machine. It was like video scenarios. And you basically, I give George the gun and say, now this is the situation you're going into, deal with it.
What you going to do?
What you're going to do. And though you're not trained like the police officers, but it'll give you a chance for that moment to see like how it could go wrong really fast. But when we talk about vehicle and traffic stops, I can tell you this, if you had in your car bag of potato chips, 2-liter soda, Sudafed, some batteries, Coleman fuel. You know, you're going for your weekend getaway, some toothpaste, and you had that laying on the back seat of your car, you would think nothing of it. Hey, I picked up the shopping list for my kid. He's going camping for the weekend. To you, that's nothing. To me, that's a potable meth lab.
Mm.
Because if you look up portable meth labs, those are the major ingredients. They're common household things that will generate additional questions. And these additional questions is usually what will get George or the common citizen agitated, you know?
Yes.
So, because now you're going, why are you asking me? Why is there a drug dog here now? And that's what escalates it. And I know I keep going back to this unintended consequences of a cigarette ban for menthols, because a menthol or a pack of cigarettes now becomes that package of camping stuff, because people are going to look at it, as police officers are going to look at it like, are they legal or are they not legal?
Right.
So we can't give, us police officers anything to make us ask the extra question. And when those extra questions start getting asked, instead of us getting elevated, we need to get calm, because the more questions that are asked, that means they're seeing something.
Yeah, but Eliot, the thing is, and if I'm not doing wrong, I'm still wrong. That's the perception that many of us have. You understand? Am I wrong to even?
No, not at all. Look, I'm gonna tell you, we already know. I've been a police officer 34 years. I get pulled over, I still get nervous. I can get pulled over. I got pulled over not too long ago, and the guy was like, "Hey, Eliot, I knew it was you. I just needed to tell you something." But I went into, I get there. I get the,
because until you show them the badge, anything pop off.
And not even that. This was a situation where he had to really, he wanted to tell me something. He recognized me going by, and that's the thing that I think society doesn't realize. In many cases, these police officers are well trained, and I think the thing I really want to echo the most is bad police officers are very few in between. I think one of the bad issues that I think we in law enforcement have to start working on and figuring out is that promotions are tied to productivity. And productivity could get people to the point where they're just, because I know if I produce, there's no quota, but you're making a lot of money. You just can't go out there every day, because society would be like, listen, this man's been out and sitting in my driveway for the last 8 hours and he didn't move or she didn't move. So, but productivity for those that are go-getters will generate, mass amount of numbers, mass amount of productivity, because they're trying to keep society safe. But unfortunately, it generates other questions, additional questions, unfortunately, views of us stereotyping. And I don't want to make no mistake. There has been a history of police officers' profile. Now there's a difference between profiling and just good police work.
Right.
There's also a difference between, intuitions and having a conversation with someone and finding discrepancies in the conversations that generate additional questions. But a vehicle and traffic stop that has nothing more than a vehicle and traffic stop for a speeding ticket should never escalate to the point by any party, police or citizen, to the point where someone dies. It's a traffic ticket. Just like, marijuana in the state of New York, we know at some point it's going to be legal. But you smoke marijuana in your house and get in your car and you say, listen, I left all my weed home, but we could smell it once we walk up to your car. That generates additional questions. To you, you're like, I don't have anything. Why you bother me? What you don't realize is
we still smell like weed.
Smell like weed, because people don't smoke that tree weed no more. They smoke that that really good ganja. So that means you could smell it from a mile away.
Yeah, and it stays in your clothes, and it's like it's almost like a contact high without there being any smoke. I'm just keeping it. All right,
you're right. But in though I'm not endorsing it, what I'm saying is, you as the person being stopped that have chosen to smoke marijuana, that's your choice. But just understand, when the enforcement part comes in and they want to search your vehicle and you're getting hyped about it because you're like, I didn't smoke in the car, you brought that smoke to the vehicle. And I can tell you, the number one mission for police officers, bar none, they just want to go home to their family just like you do. They don't want to be put in harm's way. They don't want to have a hard day. They want to go in, if you're speeding, give you a speeding ticket or give you a break. But we have to find a way on both sides to ensure that we don't escalate to the point where it's physical.
So what about the racism? What about the systemic race? Because you say systemic racism and you have people like in our community, the DA, I don't believe that there is any in our community. What do you mean by that?
Mhm.
Systemic racism exists. It's built in, and so what do you do about that?
Yeah. You know, I always hear that word systemic racism, and it exists. Look, it exists in most industries. It's, you know, state police, county police, sheriff's department. We don't have a lock on that. It's in the public sector.
Right.
It's in you know, government levels. But I think what we have to realize when it comes from a law enforcement perspective is that systemic racism is based on the fact that most police agencies are not built for our communities. And
Mm.
when I talked about that early on is I said it's because it's dominated by white males. Now that shouldn't be a knock on white males because they chose to take the job. But what happens is you can't have someone understand you if you're not part of them. One of the things someone told me a long time ago, if you want to make a change, you got to be in it. You have to sit in there and change the mindsets of the people that are in that. So let's unpack it. So if you say, I'm trying to explain how George is or what George is about to a person that's from, say, Alaska, he's not going to understand the way George lives in Syracuse. And what happens is most police departments are built on individuals that, in many cases, are not from the community in which they're serving, which brings in what we would consider basically individuals who are not knowledgeable of the community. We also bring in a culture that is constantly repeated year after year. So the guy goes from the suburbs or from wherever he's from or she's from, they work the road. Then they get promoted to sergeant. Well, they're not going to change the mentality or their foundation of how they were raised as they move through the ranks. So that means it doesn't change. So part of the change is to be in these organizations, in these industries, having a conscious impact on a daily basis on individuals for the most part that really do want to do better,
Yeah.
but don't have an earmark to do better with.
Yeah. And I was going to say, all, I hope that in 2021, when we're having this conversation, that it's not on Eliot and the 200 other troopers out of the 4,500 to do that work. The
Mhm.
other 4,490, well, 48, the other 4,300, excuse me, what are they going to do so that they don't have that conscious bias, right? Because they got to do some work too.
Yeah. Everyone has to do some
You
work.
can't do all the work.
No. You know what? Conscious bias, you know, unconscious bias is a big thing. You know, it's amazing. People don't realize it. They have it. But what happens, see, there's certain words that turn people off.
Right.
And it's crazy when you think about these words, like when you say white or black, people
Right.
are like, oh, here we go again.
Here we go.
Yep. You say systemic racism.
Here we go.
You say racist, which is a realistic conversation in America.
Here we go.
But in many cases, we're applying it inappropriately. You know, there is bad judgment, there's stupidity, and then there's racist. You know, and in many cases, it doesn't rise to a level of racism. I also think a lot of times when we talk about individuals that do things, police officers that do things that are out of character, that are embarrassing to my profession, that I love, we want to take them at the jugular. You know, they got to go to jail. They got to go to jail for the highest charge. But in many cases, the highest charge is the fact that they lied in a report, which is a felony. And you know, the thing is, instead of trying to make sure you completely dispose of them, at least make sure that they cannot be police officers again. And I will say it: we as police officers don't want bad police. Makes us look bad. I'm tired of trying to explain to young adults when they look at me like, "Oh, you're a cop," and I got to spend 20 minutes explaining to them like, "Look, I've been a black cop all my life. I done sat on every national board there is when it comes to black policing around the country. You know, I sat on Obama's task force for reform. I went. I was a part of it. But you now are lumping me in as part of the whole process, and you know, of the negative side, and we can't get inroads. So when you talk about racism, we need to really revisit when we use that word so it's not overexposed and lose its value. Because if it loses its value, we could be in trouble.
But but the pushback on that, and I definitely appreciate what you said. Eliot Boyce, past president, Black Troopers Association, senior investigator, director. What is the you got another title too? He works with the
Employee assistance program. But I make sure the police officers are mentally and physically ready to do their jobs.
to do
So
that.
I deal with all their personal problems.
Yeah.
My crew is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And this is the end that we just need to know. People need to know, police officers, we
But
have problems too.
but what I'm saying is, here's the thing, right? And I'll leave it at this because I know I only promised you a minute. There's a lot here. I think what we need to do next is have a live call-in so people can to get some more feedback from you. But here's
That'd
what
be great.
here's what I'm gonna say. We so quick to want to not say the racist word or be careful not to say it then. You know what? We've been careful. And I think that's what the problem is. We've been careful all along, right? And so, and I hear what you're saying. You're saying it's kind of like the cry wolf thing. I understand that. But the fact of the matter is, it is that.
Yes.
And it ain't all of it, but it is it. And then and so when we keep saying, well, we can't talk about it, or I tune out when I hear it, that's because it's never been dealt with effectively, because that's all we ever been doing is not hearing it, or I gotta appease you because you don't want to hear that right now. So I really think that, and we're doing better now. I think we're doing a lot better at. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me redirect that. No,
Yes.
I am under no circumstances saying that we shouldn't talk about systemic racism, we shouldn't talk about race, and we shouldn't talk about implicit bias, that we shouldn't talk about the injustice that are going on around America. I'm in no shape or form I'm talking about that we should in any way ignore or turn our backs to the realization that policing in America as it pertains to blacks have been different, and it has not been balanced. I'm not saying that. I think statistics say it. I can say it until I'm blue in the face, and you can turn the channel or not listen or be mad at me or put bad comments in it. But if you look at statistics say even in COVID, during this COVID pandemic, the number of people that have been cited, particularly in other major cities, have predominantly been Black and Latinos.
Period.
Not having a mask on. Right. So I understand that. But when we talk about it, we need to talk about it in the same voice of suggestions and solutions. I know there's police reform coming out. One of the things that I really like is the fact that, I will tell you what the issue with police reform is, us as police officers, and I'm conscious to say us as police officers because I'm still part of the mix.
You're in the grip.
I can't separate myself because then you say they, well, you part of they. But the one thing I really like about police reform is the fact that it's forcing people to change. And one of the things I think came out that was connected to it was, if you don't show a path of change, they could start taking money from you. They'll take federal money or state money if you don't show that you're engaged in
as an institution. Yes.
Yeah, in the institution you're part of. The other thing that I always thought was huge is that we have friends, me and you friends, we part of Divine Nine. I see that Omega stuff popping up in the back over your head. I represent the Brothers of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. I understand that. We stay connected. So what happens is, if I do something crazy, George gives me a job because he says, Eliot Greek, he's not an Omega, but he Greek.
Right. Got you.
But I'm gonna give him a job. That's the same thing in law enforcement. And when you put it in that context, you got to understand that's the network and how it works. The problem is when you have a bad police officer, someone that we really should just disown and move on based on founded facts of bad behavior. He or she shouldn't be able to go to the town over and get a job and just sign on. They should be put in the database in which they are basically not permitted to be hired again.
Which does not exist right now. So
it's part of the police reform. Again, I haven't really locked into a lot of it because I'm really waiting for them to fine tune it. I mean, New York State is doing a piece, the federal government is doing a piece, but I think that database should be used because people that, look, I'm not about taking a person's livelihood away. Right. But I'm not about giving that person an opportunity to take somebody's life away because they do bad business and to continue to embarrass my profession, because I'm constantly trying to preach to young adults, listen, come take this job. And then I hear, but guess what Mike did to me last week? Officer James did to me last week. It becomes a struggle. The pension in this job is good. The benefits in this job is great. When you look at the past practices or the past people that have retired and gone off, they got homes on the lakes, boats, cars. Look, my money good. You know, my career is good.
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying, my money good, and it's because the state police gave me a chance. And I sit here as a man with 4 college degrees. So I started at OCC. I came on. I went to Oswego State. I went back to Oswego State and got my bachelor's. What was key about that? Visiting State Police paid 70% of it. And I went on to get my master's in criminal justice, State Police Master's Program. They paid 100%. They paid my salary and my tuition. And then from there, I was like, that's not enough. I finished up my master's in public administration from Marist, which Vision State Police paid 75%. You know, there was a stipend in it, but at the end of the day, you know, I've been blessed to have the opportunities that I have based on this job, and I think it's available to everybody.
I see that recruiting thing right there at the end.
No, I'm working it.
I know that's right. Ending it right here. There's so much to get to. I heard you say, if you get stopped by the police, survive the encounter, chill, and I know a lot of people ain't gonna want to hear that.
No,
but that's the point. But that's what we got to do. You know, it's like what our parents did. Those who grew up, my parents didn't grow up in the South, but for their parents did, and they had to do certain things to protect their children from some of it meant leaving the South, some of it meant surviving the Jim Crow. But I think that's what you're saying, until we can demand, not ask for, but demand change from the system. Eliot, you know, we got a lot to say.
We got a lot to say, but I would tell you, when it comes down to that, George, it's look, I'm just quite frankly tired of seeing people losing their lives for senseless reasons. So I'm not telling anyone to buckle down. I'm not telling anyone, you know, as we say on the streets, to be a punk. But I am saying at some point, you know, you have to take it to the conversation like you're talking to your girl or you're talking to your husband. You know, at some point, you're not winning that conversation, so you're going to leave it alone. You only could go but so far with them before it gets to the point where you know that breaking point. And I'm saying that when you're dealing with police, if you want to get your point across, so be it. But also, if you want to really impact and help the community, report them. Go in and file a complaint. Because what happens is, if you argue on the side of the road, that's you and him or you and her. But when you start filing complaints and that jacket starts to look crazy because it's over and over and over and constant, that's when you have an impact and you have the ability to move that person on, or you have the ability to at least have an impact on him and survive.
All right. So how do you get the badge number? Are they required to give it to you? How do you get that? Because or you can just say, at this day, at this time, I was stopped. They can look in the database and they can figure out who, because the report has been filed. All right. Last thing. Or
you read the car number.
Read the car number.
That's you know, because you're right. And I can see America, and I can see the people on George's show. Yeah, as soon as I ask him what his name is, he really gonna get mad, or she
right,
really
right. Get out the car.
So you just adjust your mirror and read the car number.
Oh, you know. Yeah, true that. And let me just say this. We tend to talk about the bad police counters because I've had, I was recently, I shared this with the chief of police. I was recently in New Jersey, stuck on the GWB.
Woo.
And that's right. And it was my frat brother. I'm calling him out. But anyway, we were stuck on the GWB. That trooper helped us. Then we got fixed and we were headed back to the city, and then got stuck on the other side, right? And the two troopers.
Where'd you get that rental car from?
No, this was my boy. That's another show. So then, and this just happened like over in the end of the year. And so then on the other side, these two young troopers, and I think I either called, I called the troopers, or I tried to call in to tell them how, what happened during that time. And I think either I tried to do something with it, but both of these gentlemen was so like they were the epitome of what you would want, you know, for troopers. You know, oh no, you're in the wrong spot. Let me use my car to bump you up. That's how bad it was. We eventually made it back to the city, but let me bump your car up so you can get out the way, because this is not safe for you to be here. You all right now? Do you need me to call a tow? Do you need me to, you know? So this was they did everything. So I guess I'll leave you with, that was a good encounter. And we were, but truth, I was waiting for the sideways thing to happen.
Nah,
You know what I'm saying?
nah.
But
there are more good police officers doing the
right.
job, earning
Right.
their checks, doing it the absolute right way than there are bad. It's just unfortunately what happens is, and look, I gotta give you some of this. Media will sell a bad story forever and ever and a day. It is not. It's look. It's someone's livelihood to keep the story going. But I think we have to really do better as a community, making sure that
Well,
we engage in really, embrace the good ones so we don't lose them.
I understand that, but I also say Derek Chauvin showed us. I don't think you needed media for that. I think
No. Yeah.
with everybody home during the pandemic and that broadcast all over, y'all ain't need us for that.
No.
Because
Derek Chauvin, and I don't give honor to his name. What he did is unfortunately killed the man on live TV. But
right.
what he also did is he galvanized America from all aspects, diversities, community, race, athletics, politics, everywhere. He put America and American policing on blast. And he also basically, so what happened with this particular incident, a lot of people don't realize is, in many cases, there's a shooting, but he didn't comply. That's a big word.
Oh,
Didn't comply.
oh, I'll give you the other word. I feared for my life.
No, and stop resisting.
Stop resisting.
Hear those words, then you need to go, okay, stop moving. Just because those are words are basically giving you understanding that they are.
That's their license.
We are basically giving you a warning that you're not complying, you're not following directions. But what he did is he, for the first time, even with police officers, basically said, I don't have an answer for that. See, before, in many cases, there was an answer, like, he didn't comply. She ran, she did this, she may have had this. In this particular case, policing, community, society on every race, gender, economic level, social level, basically said, there's no answer for that.
No
and
answer.
we have to do something different. And now this is the different that we have to do. I will tell you, City of Syracuse, we want to, I think we need to do programs like What to Do by Stop by the Police, which was put on by the National Black Police Association, or The Law on You, which is a program done by Noble, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, just to engage the community and give them an opportunity to ask questions.
So, Eliot, how can we get that done? So let's make that happen.
We'll talk. I'll get the programming. There's people that will come in and do some programming. We're going to talk about this menthol ban. We're going to talk about that, how it's going to impact us. It's going to be the new crack cocaine if they do this. Now, again, the ban on menthol cigarettes won't have any legal aspect in the sense of if you possess them, they won't criminally charge you, but it still generates the extra question. So right. Those are things we need to talk about. We need to talk about how to avoid the extra question. And you know what? I'm in. I live here in Syracuse, and we didn't say that. I'm a local guy. Been here for over 28 years.
Yeah.
So
I tell you what, we'll do that. We're gonna make that happen. We'll be in touch. Eliot Boyce is a senior investigator with the New York State Police, and he's also past president of the Black Troopers Association called the Guardian. Is that what they're called?
Guardians, yes.
Guardians. Yes. Eliot, so much to get to here. Inspiration for the Nation. We'll have you back. We got a whole series of conversations with this brother. But what I've always liked about Eliot, he's always been Eliot, whether he had the badge on or not. Thanks, Eliot. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate you, sir.